The first question I have is, can Nick Suriano actually challenge the field at 125 pounds? We know he's a national champion and a national finalist, but it's been quite a while since he's actually wrestled in college wrestling, right? It's been some time since he actually wrestled a folk-style match, which is back in 2019 in the national finals against Dayton Fix. So is he going to be able to challenge these guys that have been wrestling in the meanwhile? Can he actually challenge Spencer Lee for that top spot? And on top of that, is he actually going to be able to challenge guys like Drew Hildebrandt and like Brandon Courtney, who he hasn't even competed with yet in college wrestling? If you're wondering about the other questions that I have for the rest of the season, then let's stop stalling and start talking wrestling. What's going on, wrestling fans? My name's Josiah, and welcome to Fanco Wrestling, your source for college wrestling news and discussion. And as we head into the new year, I thought it'd be fun to dissect and look at what's coming up the rest of the year and put some questions out there for all of the things that are kind of up in the air, like Nick Suriano. And like this next question about Michigan is, can Michigan actually take on Penn State? They wrestle on they wrestle on January 21st. I believe it's at Michigan, and both teams are expected to have their full lineups, which we honestly really haven't seen yet so far this season, with Michigan bringing a lot of their newcomers into the fold and Penn State still kind of figuring out a couple spots. Now, what's interesting about these lineups is that there are still, I mean, a lot of these guys like Penn State and Michigan, who typically score bonus points, big bonus points, like Nick Lee or Stefan Micic, are going to be wrestling off against each other, right? We have that match right going on at 141, Srirachi and Mass at 174, Brooks and Amin at 184, and Kirkfleet versus Paris at heavyweight. These are guys who typically do score bonus, but, I mean, probably aren't going to be able to do much of that in this match. So can Penn State, are they going to be able to fend against Michigan, kind of is my question. And the next question I have is, can teams and which teams will realistically compete for a national title? We know that Penn State and Iowa are at the top, but how are these other teams going to do against them, like Arizona State and Oklahoma State, who we've kind of seen push these teams already to the limit in the beginning of the season, with Cornell and Penn State being a close duel and NC State and Iowa being a close duel? So which teams are going to actually realistically compete for that title? I think we'll really find out kind of towards that February area, end of January, February area, where we really see these full lineups and what's going on with the entire field, is who is actually pushing Penn State and Iowa to the limit. And next, I have to ask this because, you know, I just mentioned Oklahoma State, is like, are there going to be any more fights and drama with Oklahoma State? We already saw the Iowa State and Iowa match. There was a little scuffle after. Oklahoma State and Oklahoma, there was a little, Ferrari ended up tackling the heavyweight, double leg in the heavyweight afterwards, just because of some things that were said. So I wonder if there are going to be any more scuffles. I surely hope there aren't, but feuds are just going to continue to get higher. Flames are just going to keep rising throughout the rest of the season. And that kind of brings me also next to AJ Ferrari. And is he unbeatable? Is anybody going to be able to beat him? His lone college loss is actually to Noah Adams of WVU, who's no longer wrestling this year. But he's been pretty much dominant throughout this entire season, getting taxed and majors and just crushing the rest of the field. But you got to wonder, like, who is going to have it out for him? Could Max Dean of Penn State have it out for him, or Pat Bruckey of Michigan, who Ferrari has yet to face in his college career? Nino Bonacorsi of Pitt is also going to be really on Ferrari's heels as he looks to avenge that loss from last season. And you look at Oklahoma State, you look at Mizzou, and you'll wonder, what are the odds that Mizzou can upset Oklahoma State? It's going to be another tough duel here between these two teams, and especially because it's a battle for the Big 12 title. Who is going to end up getting the better of which team? And I'll tell you what, it's close right now. I have it basically tied, like 15-15 or something along those lines. I think it's going to be a tied duel right now as we look at it. But you look at also, Mizzou has losses to NC State, has losses to Virginia Tech. So if Mizzou upsets Oklahoma State, that's going to make for some crazy rankings that I can't even fathom to figure out how that would all work out. And I do have to wonder also with Marinelli and O'Toole, you look at Iowa, you look at Mizzou, what would happen if they wrestled, this is the match that fans have wanted to happen for quite some time. Wanted it to happen at last year's NCAA championships, didn't get it. Wanted it to happen at the collegiate wrestling duels, didn't get it there either because Mizzou got beat by NC State. And we just haven't been able to see this match at 165 pounds. But with these two so far undefeated on the season, I do wonder, like, honestly, Marinelli has been a top title pick in past years for me. O'Toole is my pick this year to win at 165 pounds, but these two will meet hopefully at the bout at the ballpark, which is in February. And then, I mean, who knows what could happen at the national championships. But could Marinelli, this is my next question, is Marinelli going to be able to silence his haters? And we know that Marinelli hasn't necessarily performed to his ability at the national championships. And the only reason I say that is, right, based on what has happened at the national championships before him. Now, all of his matches, I mean, all the matches that he's lost have been so close. Last year, 3-1 sudden victory with national champion Shane Griffith. He lost 2 years before that to Mekhi Lewis in a close, I think it was a 3-1 bout. And then, I mean, he just keeps having these close matches at nationals and just doesn't perform to his ability. Is this the year that he's going to be able to shut up the haters, though, and win a national title for himself and help Iowa to that team title? Or could this be the year that a newcomer wins 165 pounds yet again? It's happened, as I've said, with Aymar winning, and then Vincenzo coming in and beating him as a newcomer, and then Mekhi Lewis beating Vincenzo Joseph, and then Shane Griffith coming in. Could this be the year that a newcomer comes in and wins again? Like, could Carson Karchula get it, or Keegan O'Toole, who we just talked about, win a title? Julian Ramirez, who already upset Shane Griffith, last year's national champion, at the beginning of the season. I mean, it's very possible that a newcomer could win this weight. So I do wonder, will any freshman win the NCAA championships? 165 pounds is a weight where I really think that this could happen. But I also think another weight that this could happen is at 197 pounds. And you see here with Carson Karchula pushing Griffith to the limit, but Griffith found a way to put it out. But at 197 pounds, yeah, A.J. Ferrari's at the top, but he hasn't wrestled a lot of the field. Braxton Amos is a new freshman who has, I mean, a lot of height behind him. Isaac Trumbull of NC State, I've been excited watching him wrestle throughout this season so far and pushing All-Americans to the limit. And so I wonder if any of these guys can win a national title, but also which freshman could still pull a red shirt this year. There's still a lot of season left, and there's still a lot of guys we haven't really seen yet. Oklahoma State's already pulled Carter Young's red shirt, and he's been wrestling really, really well so far this year. But I wonder for Penn State, is Alex Facundo going to get his red shirt pulled at 165 pounds? Is Patty Gallagher of Ohio State going to get his red shirt pulled? My thoughts on Gallagher, actually just got an email about this, is I don't think that Ohio State's going to pull his red shirt just because they're going to kind of let the field settle out a little bit more this year. Give him a year of training, a little bit more of, open tournaments and things like that until he's really, really ready to jump in and win maybe a couple of titles at 165 pounds. So I doubt that Gallagher is getting pulled out this year, but what do you think? Is somebody else going to get their red shirt pulled, or somebody unexpected that we don't even isn't even on our mind right now? Which wrestlers will repeat this year is something I wonder, because we could honestly see 8 or 9 of last year's national champions repeat. This is a reminder of last year's national champions from 125 to heavyweight. Now, there's a little bit of a thing at 49 and 57 because O'Connor bumped up to 157. 149 was left open, but boom, Yanni came back and ended up filling in, and he bumped up from 41 to 49, and he could win a title at 149. But I do wonder how many of these guys will end up repeating this year, because we could honestly see like 8 or 9 guys repeat and get on the stand this year, but there's also guys that could potentially get upset. But Spencer Lee, I don't think he's one guy who's getting upset, and that's why I wonder, is he going to be making history this March as the 5th ever 4-time national champion with the likes of Cale Sanderson, Pat Smith, Kyle Dake, Logan Stieber? Is he going to be the Iowa Hawkeyes' first ever 4-time national champion? I'm super excited to see what Spencer Lee has in store for March. But also, he could be making history in another regard with a Hodge trophy. If he gets a third Hodge trophy this year, that means he would tie Cale Sanderson for the most Hodge trophies. And what's interesting about that also is that Cale Sanderson, you may not remember this, but he actually tied somebody else with the Hodge. It was a co-Hodge winner in his second year that he won it. Spencer Lee, similar thing last year, co-Hodge trophy winner with Gable Steveson. So it'd be really interesting if he won it outright this year. I don't know who will win it, and that leads me to my next question of who will win the Hodge this year. Yes, Spencer is at the forefront with Gable Steveson as well, but with them, they haven't wrestled as many matches as guys so far as David Carr has. Like, David Carr has been out there wrestling. He's just wrestled a couple more duels and tournaments so far this year, so has a couple more bonus percentages under his belt. Same with Yanni Giacomo, and they've been looking really, really good. So if they continue that and they continue to win a title, it's going to be tough competition for the Hodge. I also want to talk about AJ Ferrari, who's had some tough bonus point wins this year and is a contender. Now, like, the sportsmanship thing, especially with what happened after Oklahoma State duel, brings me into question. But remember, I also kind of commented last year on Gable Steveson on the sportsmanship issue, and like with his whole scuffle with Mason Harrison, he still ended up getting the co-Hodge. So I don't know how much that is going to play into effect at the end of the year. The next question, which teams are going to remain undefeated? Which teams will remain undefeated? Because right now there are 10 undefeated teams in college wrestling. And you look so far this year, like I said, a lot of unexpected things. Mizzou, NC State, Virginia Tech, Arizona State, Cornell, all teams that honestly could have been like undefeated this year and all have losses on the season so far. So these are the undefeated teams right here. Illinois and Indiana and Iowa. I mean, the list goes on to, I think there are 13 undefeated teams right now. And only a few can actually finish undefeated. You see, there are a lot of Big Ten teams, and obviously the Big Ten season hasn't really started yet, so that's why a couple of them haven't had losses. But once these teams might run into, Iowa or Penn State, it may get that loss on their record. But the teams that could finish undefeated, you could see either Iowa, Michigan, or Penn State. One of those teams could finish undefeated. Probably not two of them. Oklahoma State can possibly go undefeated. They're going to have to get over Iowa. And, I mean, Oklahoma State could still hand Iowa a loss. Franklin and Marshall, it's possible that they go undefeated. And then Cal Poly and Harvard are also undefeated right now, but they also haven't wrestled any duels at this point in the year. But we could see there you run into some tough competition as well. But how many conference streaks will continue this year? And by that, I mean, how many teams are going to win the conference title again, just like they have in previous years? Iowa, I believe they're 2-time Big Ten champions. Oklahoma State, 9 or 10 time in a row. They're going to be challenged by Mizzou this year, so that's going to be a little bit tough. Campbell is going for their 4th SoCon title, and NC State, a similar story, going for their 4th ACC title. Which streaks will continue, and who is going to uphold their streaks? I also wonder what's going to be the most exciting duel of 2021. Oklahoma State versus Iowa on February 12th on Flow Wrestling, the bout at the ballpark. I'm super psyched for that to happen. Iowa versus Penn State, January 28th. NC State versus Virginia Tech. I'm going to that duel. Have my tickets to that duel January 21st. I also have tickets to Ohio State and Penn State, which I'm really looking forward to. But which duel is going to end up being the craziest, the most exciting duel, the duel that fans talk the most about at the end of the year? Which is that duel going to be? I also wonder what's going to be the story of the national championships. And as I continue to roll with these questions, right, there's so many unanswered questionable questions right now. I wonder what your question is for the upcoming year, whatever that regards. What's going to be the story of the national championships? Because it's honestly different every year, right? We have so many different stories. Like last year, Spencer Lee, no ACLs, and excuses are for what's his. AJ Ferrari hitting his 665-pound deadlift. Shane Griffith saving Stanford wrestling. I mean, there's so many stories that just happen every year, and I wonder what it's going to be this year. Just like in the past, Nick Suriano in Asheville being Rutgers' first ever national champions. Kyle Conho, I mean, one of my favorite memories. I mean, him beating Colin Moore. That was a crazy story of the 2018 national championships. What's going to be the story this year? And part going along with that is who's going to emerge victorious at 174 pounds. Because with Kemmerer of Iowa, with Hidley of NC State, Srirachi of Penn State, Mekhi Lewis of Virginia Tech, and, a lot of other guys in the field, but just those four are national finalists or national champions, and you got to wonder who ends up on top at that weight. We thought there was going to be some meetup at the collegiate wrestling duels, didn't end up getting the matchups between any of those guys, even though they were all four there. I wish we would have got some of those matches, but we will be seeing Mekhi and Hidley on January 21st, Kemmerer and Srirachi on January 28th, and some rematches at the conference championships. And speaking of some things in the conference championships, I wonder who's going to break out big, who's going to have that second half of the season breakout performance that nobody expected, except so everybody says, like, nobody expected that to happen, and then the fans of that college are all like, oh, we expected that to happen. We fully expected him to win a national championship. Okay. But these are guys that may not have performed as well, at the beginning of the season, and now they're really pushing the pace, and maybe they were an All-American in the past, but maybe they just kind of fell out of the limelight for a little bit and are looking for a way back around. Some guys that stick out to me, Eric Schultz of Nebraska, as well as teammate Taylor Venz of Nebraska at 184. Hunter Bolin also at 184 at Virginia Tech, I think, is a guy who's been ranked top in the country before and is looking to find a way back into that forefront. Rayvon Foley bumping from 125 to 133, All-American, I think can really is a real threat the second half of the season. Matt Feinsover of Duke at 174 pounds is another guy I think you could see jump into that limelight and top in the rankings. And I wonder after the season's over, which wrestlers are going to stick around? This is question number 21 of 22. Which wrestlers are going to stick around after this year? We know that a couple wrestlers already have some things that they've said, such as Roman Bravo Young announced his apparent retirement after this year. Gable Steveson says he's going to the WWE after this year, but he also said that last year. And I wonder, even outside of that, like, we didn't expect Massa or Michich or Miles Amin to return this year, and they still did. But we also didn't expect, like, Noah Adams to leave this year from college wrestling, and he did leave. So there's a lot of questions with all this eligibility of guys who will stay and guys who will come back, which leads me to the last question, which is actually for you. And that question is, what's your question for 2022? What do you expect to happen in the rest of the season? There's so much up in the air for the upcoming season. So I wonder what you have to say. And yes, I finally got this end screen updated with all of the Patreon and YouTube supporters who have supported Fanco Wrestling. If you are down there, thank you so much for supporting this endeavor of mine as I continue to grow and talk and discuss and grow the sport of college wrestling.